All right, so welcome to week 9, VGDA Spring 2015. So we're still waiting on Brian and his as of yet unnamed friend to show up. But Brian, once again, is the lead writer for the Diablo team, and this other guy, or girl, I guess he is one of the level designers on the Starcraft team. So that's really cool, and they haven't sent me an email saying they're not coming, so we're just going to go ahead and assume that they are. So yeah, on with the show. So things to talk about that I'm just going to talk about because it's going to be really quick, so we give as much time for over to the development team as possible. Talking about the Beach Tech Brawl that happened on Friday in the Council of Gamers, Game Lab that's going to be happening in the summer, and the best named event ever. Oh, okay, keep on going. All right, so for those of you who don't know, the Beach Tech Brawl was, actually, for those of you who don't know, the Council of Gamers is this idea that we have where we really want to kind of unite all of these separate gaming organizations on campus, because gaming is kind of marginalized. There's still kind of a, oh, they're just a bunch of nerds mentality on campus. Considering that most people in the world play video games, that's kind of silly, and so we want to kind of broaden the perception of what it means to be a gamer, and the way we're going to do that, plan to do that, is through this Council of Gamers, this idea that we'll work together to put on larger, cooler, more awesomer events, where we just hang out, play games, but that's totally fine because people see that we're having fun, they'll probably want to join in, and they'll be like, oh wait, I'm a gamer too. Just because you play hardware doesn't mean you're not a gamer. So yeah, and so the Beach Tech Brawl was kind of the first run at this. It was mostly put on by Scott Vandegrift over at the tech store, but it was a lot of fun. For those of you who couldn't make it, you totally missed out. Ha ha. And we had a lot of fun playing game Vainglory. One of the VGDA teams, Team Maya Papaya Jambalaya, came in 3rd place out of 6. So we're pretty proud of that placing. Yeah, that's right, we got some fun prizes. I think Paul walked out of there with like 6 Newegg water bottles. So, yeah, made out like a bandit. And Ellen, no wait, that's a 3v1 get out of their Wong, was one of the first place people in the Temple Run thing, so that was pretty awesome too. All right. Yeah, so Game Lab is VGDA's is going to be the 2nd annual summer game development workshop. Where basically what we do is we reach out to the community, invite them to bring their little children so that we can totally correct them, so that we can teach them how to play the beginnings of game development, because we like the idea that we want to get people interested in it at a young age. It's really important for a lot of reasons. There was a high school over at in LA Unified School District that actually reached out to us to help them with their game development program, and that's just some momentum that we really want to build upon. And since this isn't like the first semester that we've been around, we'll be able to do an even better job than last time, so I'm really looking forward to actually having a few months to plan it as opposed to a few weeks. And yeah, so moving on to the best named event ever, the name of it is the Pajama Jam. Yeah, right? Isn't that a great name? Yeah, a little bit of applause, I like it, thank you. So it's the best name for an event ever. You are never going to find a better named event. Just putting that out there. So it's basically like kind of, we've all been looking at doing some kind of game jam, dev jam thing with you, but finding a venue for that is ridiculously hard. Doing it on campus would cost us about $400 just for the venue, I think a little bit more actually. And we super broke, so can't do that. But this is going to be at my house. My parents are going to be gone for spring break. I already okayed it with them, so this is going to be like woo! But it's going to be a lot of fun. The only thing is onesies are mandatory. You have to come in your onesies pajamas. If you don't have them, yes, you have to buy them.
Where?
I don't know. I'm going to try to get some custom VGDA onesies. Anyway, are they expensive? I don't know.
Some of them are.
Like the Pikachu ones? The kawaii waifu Japanese ones?
Oh yeah, those Japanese ones go for like 60 plus. Yeah, that's for the cheap ones.
Gotcha. Well, just like make it with like felt or a zipper.
Felt and hot glue.
Yeah, felt, hot glue, and zipper. Actually, no zipper, just hot glue. I'm just gonna hot glue myself in there.
Help yourself.
All right, cool. So that's it. That's all I have for you guys today. Yeah, I know. You guys can all leave. No, but what we're going to do, as per usual, is break off into our development teams. We're going to do our scrums. We're going to come back for our meetings, and our speakers should show up eventually. Yeah. All right. So.
All right. Everybody ready? Yeah. So I just want to remind everyone, this is what the game looked like before.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, considering that, this is what we now have. It's not broken.
Do we have sound?
We should.
Oh, what? Yeah. That's how it was before. Yeah, I was thinking.
Oh, there's level select? Music?
That's technical. Yeah.
Here, we'll restart it for you so they're a little solid.
There we go. Yeah.
Alright. I'd like to let you hear more music, but it's a long song. It's a fantastic song. It's long. So.
I think we should have the contrast towards the arrows.
Oh, it's the animation though!
Is the life counter already?
You're missing all of them!
It's not showing up.
No, it's working. I've already taken a few hits, but.
Oh, it's on the left?
Yeah, it's the little orange thing. Oh, I think I'm already actually.
I don't even know how the game works.
You're the president! Have you not been?
You designed it.
You missed again!
Oh. Here we go. Anthony died. All right, let's do another round of applause. And the amazing music by our sound team. Yeah, let's hear it. All right, cool.
Just to go over our art style, what we're culturally influenced by is East Asia, and for our aesthetic, we're going for Sumi brushstrokes with thick and thin bold lines with watercolor texture for the coloring, and the perspective is literal top down. And then, so you can see here the comparison for the characters. The characters, we have them bolder, more saturated colors. It's not as watercolor, and the lines are much bolder than the environment, which you will see next. And so you could, for the environment style, we're going more watercolor with it. It's softer. The lines are not as opaque to try and provide that contrast between the character and the environment itself. Next. Now you can see here the animation. We're not done with it, but you can see the roughs that people have been working on. We have people that are in the animation program and those that aren't working on animation. So you can see we have different levels contributing in this aspect. Next. And some more refined roughs. Next. And then this is, we have 2 animations complete. This is the Oni Archer spawn, which I worked on with some of Klute's help. Next. And then this is the Oni Archer shoot, which Jimmy line arted and animated, and I did the coloring on it. Next. And just, this is some miscellaneous animations. was it Francis did the arrowhead, which is not incorporated yet, but we're going to be editing that arrow, and then the health bar, which I animated as well for the UI. Next. Environment. And this is what we have thus far. There's still some assets missing, which will be refined, like the statue isn't actually done, and we had some other details that we want to include in as well, but this is what we have thus far, which you saw programming incorporate. Next. And for illustration, we do have a couple of rough sketches for the first cutscene and panels. So this here you see Shun coming in to the village, seeing that it's burning and the wall is broken into. Next. And this is her in the village. Next. And so for tasks for this week, we're going to finish up the animations that we haven't completed yet, along with the environment assets. Then once we complete those, we're going to work more on narrative elements, like getting the level 1 environment done, along with the storyboards for the cutscenes. And then just if you want to look at what else we're working on, I didn't post everything that people have submitted. And that's it. Any questions, comments, or feedback?
So the ones, the small animations you showed at the end they were 100% done. The ones that
What do you mean
were,
for the miscellaneous ones?
yeah, the miscellaneous ones and the other one, are they all done?
Just the one for the health bar, but not for the hit damage.
And the arrow spin?
The air spin, no, we're going to refine that one still.
Do you have any suggestions
In terms
for
of,
the aerospins?
I think he was asking.
I was just asking.
Okay.
Because the sound design does animations.
I mean, sound, we talked about earlier, just getting time for the end, or the amount of frames for the animation, but I was just curious as to how much of it is ready to go. In the frame before this, though, everything's done, this one and the one for it, right?
Yes.
So sweet. Awesome.
For the cutscenes, are those gonna, I know I've asked this before, I just wanna make sure, is it gonna be a thing where they're a specified amount of time, or is it gonna be like dialogue?
We have rough amounts of time. There's not gonna be dialogue. It's all you.
Okay, so it's like a set amount of time?
Yeah, I was working with the lengths of the cutscene, just going through and looking at all the panels. And so I have like rough estimates for like length of time.
Yeah, it's probably gonna be within all of us, but we have estimates. So we'll
Yeah.
have Katrina, the animators, look at them, see if that works. We'll have you look at them, see if that works.
But
So-
we should probably work together on like sound, just talk about it a little bit to make sure that like it all works out. Yeah.
Is it going to be fixed time, or is it going to be, or are people going to be able to click?
Fixed time. They're gonna be like movies.
Okay.
I'm sure.
And would we be able to get the timeline for those cutscenes? We've actually already built an area for the cutscenes to go in the game. It's functional, we just don't have the images.
Yeah.
But it also currently progresses on mouse click, which wouldn't work for syncing it up with the music, so.
Yeah. So yeah, as soon as we have the times, we'll get to you.
Okay.
They're on the Trello, on the cutscene pages.
Mm-hmm.
We like 2 hours ago just did the little, gave us time estimates. If you
Oh,
want to
perfect.
look at that.
Yeah, I'll take a look at
But
this.
that's rough.
And feel free to work with them however you want.
Thank you.
For the arrows, we may want to add that kind of white, light effect
The trail.
for Shun to go ahead and to convey that she has her bow is mystical, and that's what's allowing her to go ahead and kill the enemy.
Differentiate too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we might want to look at adding some kind of light effects to the arrows, because I mean, I couldn't see them from here, and.
Oh yeah, because I told Francis to just throw in some color pads.
Okay, all right, cool.
Yeah. That's not going to be the color, but.
And it seemed like she was a little bit lost in some areas, but we'll work on it.
It's looking great.
Yeah, seriously, it's good job, guys.
Can I back to you, Doug?
Yes.
Your health, are you having anything beyond just that image to indicate health, or are you having sound changes? I found when I was watching it, I was unclear how close to death I was. while playing the game? Which is something important to know, is like, am I 1 hit from death or am I 3 hits from death?
Would you do some sound effects for the health bar?
Are you talking about just like when she's getting closer?
Yeah, it sounds like, yeah, because you're not.
Am I the only one who had that sense?
No, that was a concern that we had, that there's not quite a very big
You
thing.
can do like the stereotypical
More
like
urgent.
ray, like, sorry, not ray, but like red, like you could start outlining the health bar in red.
But for me, it doesn't increase like the, I mean, if you want sound, you could also like have more, like the drums are getting more intense, the
Like
closer to death the
other
character's
beat
getting,
or
there's an
something
audio
like
cue
that.
to sell that as opposed
Just
to.
record something going.
We're still, honestly, I've never done interactive audio before, so we're still trying to like work out the kinks with that.
Sure.
But that would be really cool.
It would probably just trigger when you hit a certain, like maybe you have a cool drum cue, and when you hit a certain level in that health meter, that triggers the sound cue of like the intensified drums, and that's how you know.
Okay.
And if you ever go above, like you can gain health and goes above that, well then the drums fade off.
I know.
Just an idea, just some other way to sell that.
Or we could do something visual, you know, like a red border
I
around.
think we may need a visual cue for that.
Yeah, and maybe gray
People
everything
can
out a
always play
little
with
bit.
the sound on.
You do a little bit of all of it.
Yeah,
I mean, whatever.
yeah, we can, you know, gray everything out a little bit and then have the borders become a little red.
All right, cool. Well, some good ideas.
Just
Jeff-
visually, just to myself.
There's a Dev Jam as always on Sunday, and then there will be the Jam Jam. I'll over spring break, and I'll be announcing the dates on that. I think it's going to be like a Wednesday, Thursday thing.
So content has actually done a ton this week, and nothing's ever done, but we're effectively done. We're effectively done with all the big things that we need to do. So we finished level 2. We already hit level 3. We already hit level 1. Level 2 is the last one that we needed. It's going to be, as we said last week, we are kind of making it a combination of level 2, the previous level 2, 3, and 4. So it's the forest gate. It's like this clearing in a forest where like the mountains start to meet the forest. There's this big old wooden gate that has like this really crazy like ancient knocker type thing, and it's locked and you can't get through it. It's also got these 2 like big statues, and Francis and I were talking about doing something. Not Francis, Jimmy and I were talking about doing something really cool with that, where they're like ancient heroes. Sorry, names so hard. It's also the introduction of the multi-armed spider demon, which I know we're all excited about. So basically this is our map. So you have the 2 red circles. Those are going to be the big statues that are like the ancient heroes. You have the gate there, as you can see, and then your enemies kind of spawn through there. We're going to have 3 waves of enemies. The first wave will kind of be there, and then as you get to the second and third waves, they're going to kind of encroach. And our philosophy was if you have the first wave, they're all around there, you use the statues as cover, and you're kind of like sequestered in the top right corner. Which, I mean, it teaches you how to use cover, but we kind of want to start pushing the players' boundaries by now and prepare them for the 3rd level, where you just have the 1 cover and you're kind of going to have to circle the whole time. So first wave, you're kind of just back there the whole time, but then the waves kind of curl around, so you're forced to move, you're forced to circle around the statues to find cover, and it kind of teaches you to move to find cover. And we also finished cutscenes, which is what I did, or finished storyboarding the cutscenes. So if you remember from last time, she cradles her dead lover, she looks up at the mountain, she knows what she has to do, and then she kills all the demons. And then she runs to the 2nd level, she takes the oil from the statues, then she goes to the gate, tries to shake it, but arrows come around her, demons spawn up. So after you play that level, the beast mode demon, which is one of our favorites. It's the big hulking one with the little guy on its back with the ballista. It appears, so that'll kind of give players a hint of what's coming on the 3rd level. It appears, it shoots, it shoots at June, you can't really see, but you hear a big crash, you don't quite know whether she's alive, but then she appears, she dodged it, and now the gate's gone, the gate she couldn't go past is gone. So she kind of scrambles up the mountain. And then she's up there, and we get this beautiful, like, widescreen shot of her temple. It's all serene. The fire's not up there yet, so it's just like cool balloons and everything. She pulls out her arrow and the water skin or whatever that she had the oil in. She rips something off her cloth, or a little like shred off her clothing to wrap around the arrow. And you can see it in the next one. It's all dripping with oil. She needs to light it. So she draws her arrow. She shoots, lights on fire midair because it's cool. Falls into the brazier. The brazier whooshes up. And then you can see, and then it goes back to that wide screen, and now you see the brazier lit, and the lights kind of crawl down those ropes that we have, and slowly warmth goes into all of them, and it's this beautiful, like, shining moment. She lit the fire, she did what she has to do, and then whoosh, go the ambush. And then level 5 starts. And then we all know what happens after level 5. So she's there on the ground, she's pincushioned with arrows, she's bleeding out, she's dead, she's obviously upset. But then she looks up, and she sees, and then we have this also beautiful, this is going to be like 2 screens. See, it's a lot bigger than the other ones, but she's there on the ground, just her silhouette, and the camera slowly pans up towards the sky, and then we see the next signal tower, and the next fire lights up, and the next one, and it's, again, it's beautiful, heartwarming. She's dying, but her sacrifice wasn't in vain. And then we get the sound of an arrow hitting, and the screen fades to black. Game's over. So I'm pretty excited about that. I think that's pretty cool. I showed it to my friends. I'm proud of how much story we've managed to put into like a tiny 3-level mobile game without words. So this week this week and probably for the next couple of weeks, content will be playtesting a lot. We are going to get some kind of bug report, like suggestion form. So all of you can also playtest if you have the time, which you do because it's spring break unless you're on the air team. They all like
Unless you're on the art team.
But so we're going to be creating a bug report form as soon as we can. We'll team up with technical to see exactly what you need from people, and that'll just be suggestions, bugs you find, or making our game the best we can be, and adjusting balance. We're going to be editing the documents we had just because we made changes up until like 2 days ago. Level 3 was still called level 5, so there's stuff to fix, and also making changes based on our team's crazy suggestions, like the lore that Jimmy added in like 2 days ago.
You're welcome.
We're going to be brainstorming little things like power-ups, stuff like that, arrows that do cool things, stuff that's not super art heavy, but stuff that programming can think or can do. We're also going to be answering your questions. We're probably going to set up on Trello like a special board that's just like, hey, what does this mean? Hey, what does this do? So if you guys have questions when it's not the meetings, you can just come to us and be like, what does this do? And one of us can tell you. Or like, hey, I have an idea. Like, you can do that already. You can email me, or you can get anyone on Facebook, and we'll be able to tell you, but just a specific spot because we've been getting that. And yeah, that's our job. Questions?
Yeah, I know you and I were talking this morning about maybe having an ending sort of illustration
Oh,
for
yeah.
the credits. Do you just want to talk about that at all? And then maybe we could ask around and see what other people think too.
Yeah, I was bragging about this game to my friends. And they were very upset, which is good because it's emotional, so it's good that it makes people upset. But they demanded that at the end of the credits there be a beautiful illustration of Shun and her lover holding hands in the afterlife, which I pitched to Katrina, and she seemed pretty okay with it. I wouldn't want to put more effort on the art team, but I think it would be pretty cute. There would also be a little bit of a salve on the burn that is that ending. So that's the kind of stuff that we're actually going to just be thinking about. And as we have those ideas, we'll throw them up on Trello, add to the art team, stuff like that.
All right, so hello everyone.
Hi.
I don't have a mic, and I do have a cold. So if I start trailing off and mumbling, or you can't hear me, just like speak up, or wave your hand, or yell, or do something. I'm really glad to be here today. I was really impressed by that stuff you guys were just showing. You're really on top of it. My name is Brian Kindregan, and I'm currently the lead writer on the Diablo team at Blizzard. I came onto the Diablo team at the start of Diablo 3 Reaper of Souls. Before that, I was on the Starcraft team as the lead writer on Wings of Liberty and Heart of the Swarm. And then previous to that, I was at BioWare, where I was a writer on Mass Effect 2. And then before that, I worked in the animation industry for many years as a storyboard artist. So one way or another, I've been dealing with storytelling for about 20 years, because I'm old. So I've been doing it longer than some of you have been alive. I'm guessing, I don't know. Anyway, I wanted to talk a little bit about game narrative today, but that's a pretty big topic. There's a lot of things to say, so I really sort of had to just pick one particular area. And I decided to talk about characters, because really, to me, characters, oh, well, I should say, why do I want to talk about characters? Because really, they are the core of everything in well, I should say, the core of most narrative. I suppose there's some very avant-garde narrative out there that wants nothing to do with characters. But for the most part, characters are what drive a story. So the really big things about characters and why they're so important to any talk about narrative is that they're, first of all, the hook. So if you have read a book or watched a movie or played a game that had, you know, a heavy narrative element, and it began with like a cool chase through the jungle with machetes, or it began with an amazing confrontation between different people, or a fight, or anything like that, that might have kind of, you know, grabbed you. But you've probably had this experience. About 10 minutes in, you discover that you've lost interest. You had all this adrenaline earlier, like let's take a movie, right? It started with a great car chase, and you're like, oh, this is exciting. And then 10 minutes in, you're kind of like, bored. The reason for that is that they can grab you with some kind of compelling, visually or intellectually or whatever, compelling thing. But to really hook you and drag you in, the storytellers have to find a character that grabs onto you. That doesn't necessarily mean you like that character, but there's something about that character that makes you want to know more and see what happens next. If it's just a plot idea, right? If it's, look, here's a guy standing on a tightrope, and you know, there's a bunch of spikes underneath him, and there's a really strong wind blowing, right? None of that is character. That's all just sort of a concept, and it's kind of cool. You'll watch for a minute, like, oh my God, I hope he doesn't fall. But at some point, they're gonna have to cut in close and show his wacky expression or something to make him a character that you're interested in. Otherwise, you will actually get bored, despite the incredibly compelling scenario I just outlined. So they're also why we invest. So they hook you and they drag you in, and they're also the thing that makes you keep watching. So if there's a character you particularly dislike, you invest in them. In other words, you want to see them get their comeuppance, right? You want to watch until they get it, right, King Joffrey? You know, that is the thing that really keeps you engaged as well. And so, you know, they're the hook, they're the thing that invests you emotionally, right? You can't emotionally invest in a car chase. And they keep you engaged, right? They keep you watching throughout. And then finally, this is more from a practical standpoint, but for me, the other really important thing about characters is that their motivations make all else possible. So I actually think, in a little bit of your game that I saw, I think you guys actually touched on this very thing. But if I begin a story with a 12-year-old girl standing in the ruins of her village, and they're all dead, and she's shaking her fist at the night sky and swearing that the tribe to the north will pay for this, I can actually cut to 10 years in the future as she stands in the ruins of the village of the tribe to the north, and they're all dead, and I don't have to explain anything that happened in the middle. I don't have to show her training and running in slow motion on the beach and like seeking out great sword masters all over the world to learn their technique, right? Now, we can show those things if they're cool, right? But we don't have to, because we understand the motivation, and we understand that her force of will brought her to the point where she went and wiped out that whole village. So character motivations let us cut out the boring parts. If you rely on plot, you have to show all the moving parts. You have to show A, then B, then C, then D, right? It's like a series of gears to me in a watch, right? If you take out one gear, the whole thing falls apart. Or at least the motion of the gear stops carrying through. And that's plot to me. And I always say a plot, well, I didn't come up with this, I heard someone say it, but I loved it, so I repeat it a lot. That a great and logical plot is like a Swiss watch. It works perfectly and it's not fun to watch at all. So, you know, the character motivations are a great way to really drive something. So, okay, how do you build character for game narrative? I'm so glad you asked. There's a couple of big things that I think about at the beginning. So characters should be believable and appealing, which is pretty general sounding advice, right? But there's some really specific things to consider. First, believable does not mean logical. And this is something you'll run into a lot when you're trying to create a character. People will, there's always that person standing next to you as you're working, and sometimes that person's in your head, but going, well I don't know why the character would do that, that's just not logical, no way, I would never do something like that in that situation. But the truth is, people do illogical things all the time, right? I mean, just to take a slightly creepy example, stalkers. Stalkers, you know, fall in love with someone and then they go through their mail. And they sit outside their apartment at night and see what time they go to bed. And somewhere in their mind, I think, they believe that this means these actions will help them someday achieve the result of being married to that person or having a happy life with them, right? And if you're standing on the outside, you're like, I don't think that's going to work out for you, right? But in their mind, their own internal logic, that's consistent, right? They have their own understanding of events. Now, maybe they're slightly insane too, but if you look at your own life, you know, you have experienced those moments where right in the moment you're like, this is the thing I have to do. This makes the most sense. And all your friends are like, that's really stupid. And then you do it, and it turns out it was really stupid. But it made sense to you at the time. So I went on that whole sort of tirade to make the point that your characters have to have their own internal logic. And we'll see an example of that later. That internal logic does not always look perfectly logical from the outside. And that's actually really important, because if you create a character in a narrative who always does the most logical thing, you've created a robot. And people will sense that. People will sense that this character is not real, because they always do the exact rational thing as seen from the outside. And appealing does not mean cute. I'm using appealing in the sense that it was always used in the animation industry, which is to say, I want to say compelling, but the reason compelling is not the right word is because someone can be compelling today, but then tomorrow when they wake up and they have a hangover and bad breath and whatever, they're not so compelling anymore. So compelling is kind of a transitory quality. Appeal, as it applies to character design or characters in animation, it means that they have a quality that makes you want to look at them and know what they're doing. So in the original Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, I don't think there's ever a moment that Darth Vader's on screen and you're not looking at him, right? You're not ever looking at the people he's talking to. Your eyes are on Darth Vader when he's on screen, because he is a compelling but also appealing character. He's interesting. You want to know what he's going to do next. So you really have to find a way to make characters have their own internal consistency and be appealing. So what I do when I start to put together a character is I start with what I know. So in this lecture, I'm going to use two characters that I wrote in Mass Effect 2 as examples. The two characters are followers who join your party, and don't worry, you don't have to have played Mass Effect 2 to know what I'm talking about. I'll explain as I go. But they are Jack and Samara. So working in games, obviously, something that's never happened to me in games, and it never happened to me in the animation industry either, is nobody ever came up to my desk and said, hey, we want you to create a character, so just go do that, right? They always give you something that serves the greater need of the project. So in the case of Samara, they said there was this race of blue alien women called Asari, and in the first game, in Mass Effect, there was this sense that they were kind of a fan service race because they were like sexy and they wanted to have sex with everybody and all this. And so one of the big things they wanted to do in Mass Effect 2 was prove, no, they're a viable alien race, and you know, they're not just fan service. So what I was told when they asked me to work on Samara, this is all they knew. They said, she's an Asari, she's a really tough warrior, and she will not have sex with you. That's it, go make a character, right? In the case of Jack, that one was even simpler. It was just, she's a convict. That's what we called her for the longest time, the convict. And she's mean, right? And that was really it. So that's what I start with, right? What I know. So then the next thing is I try to figure out the character hook. What is the thing about the character that grabs you right away, that you sort of understand about them? Maybe you like it, maybe you don't like it, maybe you actually totally hate it, but it's something that grabs you, right? If you are being chased by bad guys, you really want Samara nearby, right? Because she will defend you and she will save your life and she will kill all the bad guys. You probably don't want her to come over for dinner though, because she'll probably notice some behavior or see something in your house that violates something in her code, and then she'll have to kill you too. So to me, that's an interesting hook, right? A character who, you know, adheres so closely to this code that they are exactly the person you want around when you're in trouble, and then you never want them around other than that. So that is an example of a hook. So the next thing I think about is the character's backstory. Obviously, everyone is a product of a number of things, you know, but your personal backstory is one of the things that has made you who you are today. So depending on your own, you know, the game you're working on, the complexity and importance of the character, and then your own inclinations, this backstory could be a couple of sentences, or it could be like a 10-page dossier, right? But you kind of want to understand how they got to where they are today. You want to be careful not to make it a math equation though, right? Like 2 + 2 = 4, so my character is 4, right? Things happen to people and people make choices and they process the results of those things differently, right? 2 people can have the same exact experience and walk away having learned different things. So you don't want to just turn it into a simple progression of events that led to exactly who you are, but you want to understand the external forces on them and how they process those things. And then the counterpoint is I try to think of something that shows the very thing I was just talking about, that it's not just a simple 2 + 2 = 4. So an example would be Jack. This was something I came up with to try to see her as more, you know, a more well-rounded character. It actually ended up being in the game. But Jack is a character in the Mass Effect universe that's had a lot of terrible things happen to her whole life. Awful things. Pretty much from the word go, you know? So I kind of thought maybe the worst thing that's ever happened to her was that someone fell in love with her and sacrificed their own life to save her. And that to me is the counterpoint, that if you asked Jack, like, oh, what was the worst thing that happened to you? Was it being raised in, you know, in a cell and being forced to kill other children when you were a child? She'd be like, no, the worst thing that happened to me was that time that, excuse my language, that fucker fell in love with me and then sacrificed his life to save me. The point being that all of the terrible things that have happened to Jack have started to make sense to her, right? Like that's how the universe works in her mind. She understands that, and that's all pretty clear, and she can deal with that because that's the world she's lived in her whole life. The fact that this one person came along who, you know, like claimed that he loved her and then sacrificed his life for her, like that's all completely alien to her. That is outside of her realm of understanding, and that makes her scared, right? She's not used to dealing with all of that stuff. And when she finds herself in situations that she's not used to, the level of danger that she perceives goes way up. So I try to think of something in their backstory that seems counterintuitive to the rest of their backstory, I guess. And then discovering depth from the observable. That sounds kind of highfalutin, but all I mean by that is I take what I've got so far, the things that I know, the character hook, and the backstory. And I try to figure out how all of those things combine to give a character depth. Like, what do those surface clues, those are all very surfacey, superficial things, but how do they combine to let me see depth in the character? So in the case of Samara, I took all those things that I knew about her up to this point, and I realized that self-control is the essence of Samara. A very brief thing about her backstory. She was young as a mercenary. She like went around the galaxy shooting the place up and having fun and partying and having wild sex, and she was just like crazy. Then she settled down. She entered sort of the middle-age stage of her life, and she basically was ready to just kind of be a suburban parent and have kids. And then she discovered that her kids were afflicted with this horrible genetic disorder that, for lack of a better phrase, turned them into space sex vampires. So, you know, most of her daughters kind of like just turned themselves into a monastery, like to live a life of quiet contemplation. One of them went on the run and started basically becoming one of the most successful serial killers in the history of the galaxy. So Samara gave up all of her worldly possessions and went hunting for her own daughter so she could kill her, right? So some pretty grim stuff there, right? The big thing I realized about Samara is that she's given up everything, and the worst thing that she could imagine has happened to her, and the only thing she's got left is her self-control. And so she is always completely in control of herself. And if that, you get the sense, I hope, that if that ever cracked a little bit, she would just fall apart, right? Like that's the only thing holding her together, is that self-control. And so I realized that this character might have a lot of stuff going on under the surface. She's never going to say it, she's never going to show it. This ended up probably being too subtle. Like I think a lot of people didn't get it, and that's fine, that's my fault, not theirs. But the people that did, who perceived that in Samara, really loved it. But you know, she's a character who runs very, very deep, but doesn't show it on the surface. And she does reference it at one point. She says that she learned the danger of knowing too much about things, because she said, if I have to kill someone, do I really want to know that he's a good father? And her statement, it was very clear that she would still kill the guy, but she would just feel bad about it later, right? And so, better not to know that he was a good father. So that is an example of the sort of depth that is underneath the surface there. And then another thing I do when sort of just really developing a character at a high level is I think of changing their context. So, in other words, I take a character that, you know, I feel like I'm starting to know them, like Jack, and I put them in a weird place, just in my head, this is just a mental exercise, and a situation that makes no sense for them. So I think for Jack, I was like, what if Jack was at a cocktail party? And for whatever reason, through some contrivance, she couldn't do what Jack normally does, which is get drunk, cuss everyone out, and shoot someone, right? What if she couldn't do that, right? Like, how would Jack react? What would that be like? You know, and so that was just an exercise for me to really try to figure out who this character is. Because if you think of them always in the context that you originally conceived them in, then you don't discover all of their sides. So, okay, I'm going to show an example of the mission where you first meet Jack, and talk about some of the ways that we sort of get to know characters. So hopefully my crappy old laptop can play all of these quick times. They have asked you to acquire a group of people to go on a suicide mission. And so one of the people they send you after is this prisoner named Jack, who is currently on a prison ship. And so you're sent to this prison ship. They've paid a huge sum of money for her, which should be your first sign that this prison ship is maybe not the most ethical operation. But they've paid a huge sum of money, and you're there to pick her up. So nothing could go wrong, right? It's just a simple mission. You just show up and walk down the hallway and get her, and off you go. And while they're doing that, I guess I'll tell an interesting aside about Jack. For some reason, you'll notice some of the writing in this scenes, I'm really dancing around using pronouns, like he or she, because for some reason the game director of Mass Effect 2 had this idea that it would be really cool if everyone refers to Jack as Jack, and you're just you just default to expecting it to be a guy, and then Jack turns out to be a woman, and it's a huge surprise. And I didn't understand why we were doing that, because I was like, A, we're going to localize into a bunch of Romance languages where that won't work, right? And B, I'm sure you're going to advertise this character before the game comes out, so everybody will already know she's a female. But we had to do all of this song and dance with pronouns. Okay, so you're on your way to get Jack.
Cell block 2. As you can see, we keep tight control of the population. Each prisoner's cell is a self-contained modular unit. I've blown a few out the airlocks as an example. The ship is made up of 30 cell blocks identical to this one. We house thousands of criminals. We can put the whole place in lockdown on a moment's notice. Nothing goes wrong here.
Can you tell me about Jack?
Cerberus hasn't told you. Jack is the meanest handful of violence made I've ever encountered. Dangerous, crazy, and very powerful. You'll see soon enough.
Let's get on with this.
Have you had any escape attempts?
We're in space. They have nowhere to go, and they know it. But still, we exercise extreme caution. These are dangerous individuals. We need ways to control the population. I'm going to confirm that the funds from Cerberus cleared. Our processing is straight down this hallway. Just keep going past the interrogation rooms and the Supermax wing. I'll catch up with you later, Shepard.
So we were trying to do a couple different things in that scene. Obviously, we were trying to set up a combat mechanic that would come later with shields, tell you a little bit about the prison ship, make you somewhat mistrust the warden for good reason. But also, the big thing I wanted you to see, and we're going to see another version of it too, is just the ability to hear about Jack before you meet her.
If you're buying prisoners, can you buy me? Man, I don't care where you take me or what you do to me. It's gotta be better than this.
We're here for Jack.
Jack? Forget what I just said. I don't want to go nowhere with you.
Tell me more about Jack.
The worst trouble you ever saw. Mixed with some crazy and way too much biotic power. That's all I'm saying.
I should go.
Wish I could go.
That was my own take on a joke for the I should go thing. For a while, people at Blizzard used to end meetings with, I should go. So there's another example of, the guy, and yes, they were beating someone up in the cell next to him if you heard the yelling. But there's a guy who wants you to take you with him, take him with you, whatever. I can't talk good. And then he hears that Jack is going to be going with you, and he's like, never mind. So it's an important thing. Yeah, that's gonna be it.
You know how it works now?
Yeah. All right, I can man that. So it's important, when you can, to hear about a character before you meet them, right? If you hear other people talk about them, you can't always do this, but you hear other people's perceptions of them, that gives you a big insight into them, and it gives you a certain anticipation for when you finally meet them. And it's also great when you can set the stakes. So, in other words, the fact that everybody on this prison ship, warden to prisoner, is scared of Jack tells you a lot about this character, and sort of gives you the stakes of how important this is.
Yeah.
I'm doing B-Ray.
Oh yeah, so the warden has turned on you, and you're now, basically everyone's chasing you and they're trying to capture you so he can sell you the highest bidder as well. You fought your way to Jack's cell.
That's Jack. need to get down there.
So yes, while frapsing this, I ran to the wrong door. So I played this level like 30,000 times in development.
Sounds like pretty fun.
All guards, restore order. Lethal force authorized, but don't kill Jack. Checks, lock down, lock down.
Sectors 7, 9, and 11 have lost life support. No survivors.
So Jack doesn't mess around. Huh?
It's a red light.
Yeah. I go from like staring into a bright screen to looking at the back console. A really big thing that's great to do when you introduce a character, if you can, is to use the environment. So in this case, you know, your whole trip to Jack is through this clean, sterile, controlled environment. She wakes up, and within seconds, the whole place is falling apart. There's dead bodies everywhere. You know, there's like life support is lost, and there's holes in the walls. Like, Jack has completely changed the environment just by her presence. And so using the environment to express something about the character is really powerful when you can do it. And you know, not to get like too artsy, but you know, in a way, I like to think that she's kind of turning the external environment into what's going on inside of her. So, you go through the whole mission basically following in her path of instruction, and then you catch up with her at the very end.
Cerberus. What the hell do you want?
You're in a bad situation and I'm gonna get you out of here.
Shit, you sound like a pussy. I'm not going anywhere with you. You're Cerberus.
I'm offering to be your friend. You don't want to be my enemy.
They have a way of ending up dead.
You show up in a Cerberus frigate to take me away somewhere? You think I'm stupid?
This ship is going down in flames. I've got the only way out. I'm offering to take you with me. And you're arguing.
We could just knock her out and take her. I'd like to see you try.
We're not gonna attack.
Good move. Look, you want me to come with you? Make it worth my while.
Tell me what you think.
I bet your ship's got lots of Cerberus databases. I want to look at those files, see what Cerberus has got on me. You want me on your team? Let me go through those databases.
I'll give you full access.
Shepard, you're not authorized to do that. Oh, it upsets the cheerleader. Even better. You better be straight up with me. So why the hell are we standing here?
Move out.
All right, so some other things to do when sort of setting up the moment where you meet a character, which is absolutely the most important thing, is to create a tense situation. This might seem obvious, but I can't tell you how many submissions I've played, like a game mod or something, where it's like someone's walking down the road, and then there's someone standing on the road, and they're like, hey, hey, and they talk, and everything's really cool. And then interesting things ensue, right? But there's no tension to the situation. So between running into a stranger on the road or having a conversation with someone who might attack you at any moment when you're on a spaceship that's falling apart and is populated by guards and prisoners who all also want to kill you, strikes me as like a better option if you can arrange it. So try to add a lot of tension to the situation. And then characters should want to talk to each other. So again, that sounds obvious, but again, characters will often start talking to each other in stories and games for no real reason. And the example here was when I was first writing this level, I knew that Jack had to have a reason to talk to you when you first walk in. And a lot of people were like, no, it's fine. Shepard will walk in and she'll be like, what do you want? And then they'll start talking. And I knew that wouldn't work because we've seen Jack over and over again immediately attack, right? Why would she not attack Shepard? And so that's why I worked with the cutscene guys to set up a scenario where there's a guard that's got the drop on her and then Shepard shoots the guard. And that buys Shepard, I mean, Jack's like, I would've got that guard anyway, but fine, this guy obviously just helped me, so, you know, that buys Shepard a couple of lines of dialogue. She owes him a debt. And so you need to try to arrange some kind of disparity in the relationship that causes a character to want to engage with another. And so internal logic is greater than external logic. We talked about that before, but this is, to me, a really good example. I wanted Jack to just get on the stupid ship with you. Like, I was like, you've played the whole level, you can talk to her on the ship, there's no need to have a big conversation here. And I kept running into and so here's an example of a character behaving illogically, and in this case, Shepard gets to call it out. But, you know, in Jack's internal logic, just blindly getting on a Cerberus ship with some strangers is not necessarily the best answer, right? Like, yes, the ship she's on is going down, but she's a survivor. She's survived things, right? Like, that maybe that's not the only way off. Maybe there's another way off the ship. Maybe she'll find it, right? Maybe dying on the ship is better than getting on a Cerberus ship and going off to whatever horrible torture they're going to do to her. Maybe death is a better option there. So, because of who she is and what she's been through that you find out later, it makes total sense to her to stand there and argue at this moment. She wants to go with you, but she's not going to do it until she knows for sure that it's the best option. Oh yeah, and so your character should never feel like the writer's tool. So again, I really just wanted her to get on the stupid ship, right? And if I had just been like, oh, it'll be fine, she'll get on the ship, then I think you would have sensed that this character was not being true to themselves, and the writer just wanted, because the writer said so, is a terrible reason to do something. So, having looked at all that, I want to kind of look at the early factors that people use when they meet a character in a game to kind of think about who the character is. So the first thing is, and the most immediate thing, is how they look and sound, right? This is like evolutionarily hardwired into us, right? We immediately judge the book by the cover, like we're not supposed to. And we pick up on auditory clues as well. So in the case of Jack, I was very lucky. The concept artist for Jack, Matt Rhodes, completely got the character like at the same time as I did. Like the two things kind of happened concurrently. Like he just did these drawings of that crazy, you know, tattooed, shaved head, and I was doing my thing at the same time. And we started kind of like checking in with each other, and we went, oh my God, we're making the same character. It's great. It doesn't always work that way. And then the casting people got this great actress, Courtney Taylor, to do the voice. I think she's done a voice on every game I've ever worked on now. You know, it just all came together. But these are the things, people see the character, they make some judgments. They hear the character, they make some judgments. The next thing, obviously, that you judge a character on is what they do. More than, you know, what they say or whatever, it's the things they do. So you see Jack just go loco right after waking up and burst through bulkheads and go charging and not stop to talk or ask questions. That tells you a lot about her. This is kind of a rule of thumb, and there definitely are exceptions, but generally, what a character thinks of you impacts what you think of them. We tend, generally, to like people who like us and dislike people who dislike us. It's not 100%. There's like another scenario where if a character doesn't necessarily dislike you, but they don't think much of you, sometimes you have this desire to like prove them wrong, right? So like the more that Yoda was like, Luke, he's a waste of time, I don't want to take him on as an apprentice, the more, you know, Luke and we, who had been through all Luke's adventures with him, were like, no, take him on, he's worthwhile. So there's that kind of like prove yourself worthy vibe. There's also times when you'll meet a character who doesn't like you and you actually like them because of it. My hope is that Jack was actually one of those, but this is something that influences us. The environment that we find them in obviously tells you a lot about them. So you meet Jack on a prison ship, that stands to reason, that tells you a lot about her. How others perceive them, we saw that as well. You hear other people are fearful of her. And then finally, what they say. Now, I very intentionally put that at the bottom of the list because writers, at least, tend to default to dialogue, right? They're like, oh, people don't know this thing. Well, I'll throw in a line. The character will say something. And it's important for game writers, particularly, or anyone involved in game narrative, to remember that by the time the character opens their mouth to say something, the player has already made a bunch of judgments about them. They've already decided a lot of things. So what they say is very low on the list of things that influence them. So now we're going to look at the how you met another character in Mass Effect 2, Samara. And all you know about her is that she's a badass Asari that you should have on your
Those
team.
were my best troops. Tell me what I need to know, and I will be gone from here. Where did you send her?
You think I'd betray her? She would hurt me in ways you can't imagine.
The name of the ship. Your life hangs on the answer, Lieutenant.
You can kill me, but one of us will take you down, Justicar.
What was the name of the ship she left on?
Go to hell.
Find peace in the embrace of the goddess. My name is Samara, a servant of the Justicar Code. My quarrel is with these Eclipse sisters, but I see 3 well-armed people before me. Are we friend or foe?
So, go right into it. Okay. So, one thing you want to do early on, I think, with meeting the character is ask a question. And I should have said long ago, but I assume it's obvious that we're talking important characters here, right? If you go meet the merchant that you sell all your loot to, I don't think you need to know all these things. But when you meet a character and you want them to play an important part in your story, it's great when you can ask a question. There's an innate desire in game development for clarity. We always want things to be very clear. And that's because when you're playing a game, you want to understand the game mechanic so that you can, excel at that game mechanic. And that, in some ways, that level of clarity is great in storytelling. But if it becomes your default, you need to constantly remind yourself that the thing that keeps people engaged in narrative is wanting to know what happens next. So if you can ask a question, so in this case, the question is, who is this person that they're talking about? She's chasing this person. She wants the name of the ship the person left on. This mercenary is willing to die rather than reveal it out of fear. So, what is that all about? And another interesting thing is character voice. I mentioned it with Jack. Even more so, I think, with Samara. They did a great job of casting. This person, the actress, sounds older, wiser, and very calm and controlled. But also, the other meaning of character voice, which is to say, in writing, the words that you choose for the character to say is also their voice. You may have noticed that Samara uses very different words than Jack, and so the way she speaks is very formal, and that also conveys a lot about her. So people tend to try to write like really strong voice, like, how you doing, darling, or stuff like that in their dialogue. And actually, the real work of putting character into dialogue it's the words that people choose. It's not like writing a funny accent or using a lot of contractions or whatever. So, okay, your conversation with Samara carries on a bit.
Do you just kill anyone who won't help you?
If my cause is important enough, yes. Are you different?
I've killed enemies, but always with good reason.
I answer to a code that is clearly defined. If my actions are true to that code, I am just. If they are not, I am unjust. I don't pretend it is a simple matter or that it seems right to everyone, but I sleep well at night, and that is more than most can say. How may I be of service to you?
I'm going up against suicidal odds, and I need the best. That's you.
I sense the truth in what you say, and it humbles me. But I seek an incredibly dangerous fugitive. I I cornered her here, but the Eclipse sisters smuggled her off-world. I must find the name of the ship she left on before the trail goes cold.
I wish you were willing to go with the human, Justicar. I've been ordered to take you into custody if you won't leave.
You risk a great deal by following your orders, Detective. Fortunately, I will not have to resist. My code obligates me to cooperate with you for 1 day. After that, I must return to my investigation.
I won't be able to release you that soon.
You won't be able to stop me.
The human is lost here. And what did you clarify?
I was trying to convince her to leave with you, but Justicar's in their code.
The detective has been ordered to detain me. I can't force her to disobey an order.
And after a day, Samara fights her way out of custody, killing anyone in her way?
I am afraid so.
I'll get the name of that ship.
Do that and I will join you. Then the code will be satisfied.
Do you have any leads?
The Volus merchant Pitney 4 is tied to this. Eclipse mercs are preparing to kill him. Get the truth out of him. He may know a way to the Eclipse base.
Well, I've got to get back to my station. And I guess I've got to take you with me.
Thank you, Shepard.
So you can already see a difference in the way that, in the things that are important to Samara, right? You strike a deal with Samara and you strike a deal with Jack, but Samara's world and her deals are all about, you know, swearing of oaths and following certain rules and regulations, and I can wait for 1 day and then I have to be free. You know, all of this stuff is very, very specific. And that, to me, is about selling the archetype. So she is the space paladin, basically, right? And I wanted to really embrace that. Now, I think in game narrative, you should have the character meet the expectations of their archetype when you first meet them. But that doesn't mean they have to be a two-dimensional, sort of like flat character. What it means is that what you get at first is the fantasy of having, you know, the crazy convict and the space paladin on your team. And then as you get to know them better, you start to discover more depth to them. So as a counterexample, there's a character in Mass Effect 2 who he's a great character and he's very well written. I like Thane Krios a lot. But one big disagreement I had with him was his introduction is, he's an assassin. You're getting an assassin on your team. Yeah! And then you fight your way through this building and then he shows up and he assassinates someone. And I was like, yeah, assassin! And then he goes, oh, you say, like, who paid you to kill this person? And he's like, nobody. No, you know what? She was a really bad person, and I'm trying to make the universe a better place. And you're not an assassin, right? And this might seem like a minor point, but to me, it's about the fantasy of, like, yes, I get an assassin, right? So I think you should start out, and not everybody would agree with me. In fact, just about everything I'm telling you today, not everybody would agree. So this is all good topics for discussion. But I think you start out by selling the fantasy, sell the archetype, right? Give me a really strong dose of what this, you know, what I perceive this to be, and then let me find the contradiction, let me find the cracks and the ways in which they're not just the two-dimensional representation of that thing, right? But don't put your contradictions up front, right? Because then they don't mean anything, right? You're contrasting against something that I haven't even experienced yet. And I would say challenge the player in different ways. You notice both Jack and Samara do this, right? Neither one just goes, okay, you want this thing, so I want it too, let's go, right? They will challenge you and they stand up to you, basically. And I think that A, that leads to more gameplay. But B, that's also just it's something that immediately defines a character as being their own person. So, actually,
Please don't start.
Sorry. Oh my God. I should have set that up. So that this scene that you're about to see is a moment that happens in RPGs quite a lot, where everything is telling the player, go left, when you walk out the door, go left. That's where the mission is. There's nothing to do anywhere else. So the player walks out the door and turns right. I do that as a player too. So when you write RPGs, you have to figure out those moments where the player didn't go where they're supposed to, and put a little bit of content in there for them to find. So this is a moment where you're supposed to go to the mission, and instead you could, if you wanted, go back to the police station and talk to Samara while she's in custody. It's essentially a throwaway moment. It doesn't advance the plot, it doesn't involve gameplay, and a good portion of players will never see it. It still has to be there, so it was an opportunity.
Please don't start trouble about my prisoner. Trust me, I'd release her right now if I could. It's a great honor to have the Justicar here, but I could do without the honor of having her kill me. I'd like to avoid killing you, Detective. Unfortunately, the moment my code dictates I must, I will. There is only the code. She says this kind of thing like she's talking about what to eat for dinner.
You're not gonna lock her up?
Any attempt to put me in a passive restraint system will be regarded as a hostile action, and I will be forced to attack. Yeah, that.
So I wanted to find a way to get some humor in there, because again, Samara, as we've seen, is a heavy character, right? It's all serious stuff and oaths and, you know, all of this. And it really, I mean, Jack just inherently had some humor, right? But like, we needed to get some humor in here. And that's something as a writer that you have to just sort of be aware of the sort of ups and downs and how to provide different contrast. But of course, Samara's not really like a wisecracking kind of character. It's really hard to make her be intentionally funny. And so I realized, of course, that the key to humor with Samara is that she's the straight character, right? So she says these things, you know, like, you know, there's only the code, as if she's talking about whatever, right? And she's like, yeah, if you do this, I'll have to kill you. And really, it's pretty ridiculous in a way, but she's dead serious about it. And you've seen her kill someone up close already. But other characters can realize the humor in the situation. So this is where you come and get her on your team at the
A
end.
fugitive left here 2 days ago with the AML Demeter.
Shepard, you impress me. You have fulfilled your part of the bargain, and I will fulfill mine. I am ready to leave immediately, if that will satisfy your superiors, Detective. You're free to go, Justicar. It has been an honor having you in my station. And it's nice you didn't kill me, too.
The Normandy is docked near the main trading floor. I'll see you aboard.
I must be sworn to your service, so that I am never forced to choose between your orders and the code. Code, I will serve you, Shepard. Your choices are my choices. Your morals are my morals. Your wishes are my code. I never thought I'd see a Justicar swear an oath like that. If you make me do anything extremely dishonorable, I may need to kill you when I'm released from my oath.
I can see that this is a very important act, Samara. Thank you.
Truly, the life of a Justicar can get lonely. I admit I am looking forward to serving with a company of honorable heroes. Shall we return to your ship?
I need to speak to the detective.
Thanks for getting Samara out of my district. I can tell my granddaughters about meeting a Justicar. And you've just upped my chances of living long enough to have grandkids.
This evidence names the murderer. Turns out basic police work isn't so hard. You just have to leave the station.
I'll keep that tip in mind. Now, what have you got there? Interesting. But I can't verify it. It would be inadmissible. I vouch for Shepard, and any evidence he brings forward. I accept the judgment of the Justicar. You're not big on the time.
Okay, so I showed that last bit. Let's start with the last bit here. Because I wanted to show the character's place in their society. Samara, as this kind of space paladin, occupies this place where she can basically just say, I vouch for that evidence, and the police will accept it in her society. And so understanding a character's place in their society is another tool to showing who they are and letting you know more about them. So Samara has no possessions, no house. She only owns basically guns and armor. And yet she can override a police detective. And I think I've touched on this before, but character through actions, the swearing of terrible oaths. So, you know, these sorts of moments are the bread and butter of a character like Samara. She swears to be your follower, and the police detective is kind of in awe, and it's a very powerful moment. There's actually another little bit of secret humor in there that I think in the moment when people are playing, they usually seem to get, which is when she says she's looking forward to serving with a company of honorable heroes. And of course, you know, at that point you already know that the people that you've hired are like anything but honorable heroes. Like Jack is standing right there. You know, so you're kind of like, I think Samara's going to kill me. So this is one of the most important things about game writing is it's really your job to talk to designers and artists. I've noticed some people think that being a game writer means sitting there and just writing a bunch of dialogue, but that's like 10% of my work. What I really have to do is talk to people and get them sort of excited and get their feedback and their input, but really get them excited and get them to understand who the character is and what the story is and where we're going. And so, like, as I said, in the case of Jack, I felt like the design and the sound were right on. In the case of Samara, I think the voice was great. The design, the way she ended up looking was not at all how I saw her. I sort of saw her like a wandering samurai. But, you know, I went and I talked to the art director, I talked to the concept artists. They kind of had their own vision for her. It really didn't match, you know. And that's not, I don't say that to lay the blame at their feet. I'm saying that I, as the writer who was kind of spearheading that character, needed to convince them and get them on board, and I wasn't able to. So that to me is an example of where, you know, I failed, basically. But there are other really good things, I think, that I was very happy the way they turned out. That initial cutscene with Samara where you see her and she flies like very elegantly using biotic power. But most importantly, it was very important to me that she killed that merc with her boot. And that might sound like a random hill to die on, but because the animators didn't want to do it because they didn't like dealing with the collision, right? They didn't want to show that boot heel on the neck and have to worry about clipping or any of that stuff. But it was very important to me because Samara is a very controlled character who is, you know, like very disciplined in everything she does, but she's not afraid to get up close and personal, right? She's not afraid to break your neck with her boot heel. And that was very important to me because if she was just kind of like she pointed her finger and you flew off a cliff, it's very distant, it's very clean, and then you would have to wonder, does she really know how to do wet work, right? Like is she really badass and gets in there? And so I really wanted to establish that yes, she will kill up close and personal, you know? And that moment where she kind of looks down and she says, you know, find peace in the embrace of the goddess, became important to me too, because I felt like that's a moment where you really understand how powerful she is, right? Like if you ever hear those words, you probably are gonna die. So, so I felt like there was a lot of things that came together for how she would come off as a character that really helped. Oh, and then, you know, actually back on Jack, I think I forgot this at some point. I was talking about the character Hook, right? To me, the hook for Jack, despite the fact that I said the dialogue is like one of the last things that people use to understand a character, that line, shit, you sound like a pussy, actually was her hook, right? It was something that people on the team, when they heard it, we had been told we weren't allowed to swear in Mass Effect 2. If you played Mass Effect 2, you heard swearing all over the place, you could thank me for that. I was fighting to try to get Jack to be able to swear. It didn't seem right for her to be going around, you know, not swearing. And I finally just wrote that line and put it in a meeting. It was like with this many people in it, and we were reviewing the level, and she said that, and everybody was like, "Oh, that's the perfect Jack line, right?" And then there was swearing, but that line was the thing that kind of defined her. Not just because it's crude though, but because in the Mass Effect universe, Shepard runs around and says Paragon things to people. Like he'll find someone, he'll go like, "Oh, looks like things are bad for you, but I'm gonna help," right? And people go, "Shepard, you're so good." And that's okay. I mean, I'm making fun of it, but this was the first character that just basically called you on it. It was like, "Damn, that's a really cheesy thing to say," right? And that became a defining thing because I feel like maybe 45% of people encountered that line and instantly said, "I don't like this character. I hate her, and now I have to keep playing so I can see her die or something bad happen to her." And the other 55%, and I'm just making these percentages up off the top of my head, were like, "I like her. Yeah, she said I sound like a pussy. I like her." So, you know, I think that's a really interesting hook for a character. And it's also an interesting thing about characters in general, that if you like a character, you probably will never love them. I would rather you hate a character I've written than like them. Because the characters that you like, you run into them all the time, but you forget them, right? If you hate a character, I've had a lot of people tell me, "I really hated Jack at first, and I hated her for a while, and then she became my favorite character." And I think that's pretty common. Or love and hate are right next to each other on the spectrum. It's a thin line. You can jump back and forth. Like is like a side alley, right? You can't really, once you go down into the like zone, you're never coming back with a character. You know, so there's characters that you've played in games, I'm sure, if you think of it. They basically set out to make a really inoffensive character, right? They're like, "Oh, well, you can't do that, or she can't do this, because, you know, it's kind of, some people wouldn't like that." Well, yeah, but everyone likes that character, and nobody loves them. That's my rant about that. So, just a couple of short notes about dialogue. In general, these are things that I see when I see writing tests come in or game mods. Keep it short. People love to have their characters talk a lot. To be honest, I mean, I wrote this Mass Effect 2 stuff like 6 or 7 years ago. If I wrote it today, even though I wouldn't really change Samara's voice as such, her lines would be a lot shorter. Don't overdo voice. I referenced that before. People tend to try to write, you know, like they try to get all of the personality into the voice, and they don't realize a voice actor is going to come in and say these words, right? So like, you don't need to have a character say like, "I'm angry," because they're going to say the line "angry," right? But you also don't need to add like, "Hey y'all," or whatever. Like, try to add some kind of weird flavor to the voice. The voice actor is going to bring a lot of that. The stuff you're really focused on is what's going on underneath the surface of the character. Why are they saying this thing now? Why are they choosing those words and not these words? And that's actually harder to do than, so do not over-explain. Trust your audience. And if you have lots of exposition, if you have a need for a character to stand around and like explain, you know, all this stuff, then you probably need to re-examine your ideas, right? You need to find a simpler way. You need to find simpler ideas and a simpler way to convey them. So finally, just in closing, I kind of led with this, but I'll recap. Everyone cares about characters.